Do you know how many cyclocross races you won? 95 victories they have you down for?
Yeah.
Does that sound right? I was chatting to Alex Howes.
Yeah.
He was saying the part that people don't understand is Roman, welcome back to the podcast. Today I have a super special guest. All the way from America, I have Mr. Jeremy Powers. He is the voice of cyclo-cross, one of the best cross riders of a generation, an English speaker in a Euro-dominated sport. This is one of my favourite podcast conversations of the year. I really hope you enjoy it. It's Mr. Jeremy Powers. Jeremy, welcome to the Roman Podcast.
Man, so happy to be here. Let's go. We're in Ireland, hanging out in the studio. It's beautiful here.
It's cool having you here. It's cool hearing the American voice in the studio, the voice of cyclocross. I'm having a pretty surreal experience here.
That is true. Yeah. We do get after it on the cyclocross commentary. I love that. It's super fun.
I texted one of my friends. He's a huge cyclocross fan. I was like, Jeremy Powers in today. Like, any questions you'd like? And he's like, no. But just tell him to start pronouncing Wout van Aert correctly.
Well, that's interesting. Pronunciation is one of the things that you get slammed on as a commentator. And it's weird because when the Olympics happened this year, I was so excited because they did something that was super cool. They had all of the athletes say their names themselves. So they come to check in and then, Poek Pieterse says her name exactly how she says it. And for a commentator, this is like the greatest day in the world because you've just realized that you now have this huge bank of this tool at your disposal. So you'll never need to question any Olympic athletes anyways that went through this system, how they say their name. And then, you're for someone like Wout van Aert, you're going through and you're looking at like other interviews where, a Flemish commentator has properly said, Wout van Aert, like trying to get through the Flemish and the dialect and everything. But, yeah, it made it really convenient.
Do you remember when none of us could pronounce Pogačar? We weren't sure what was going on. It was this kid. Is it Pogacar has gone solo from 90 kilometers?
Yeah, exactly.
It's like, you better learn that name.
Yeah. Oh man, Rob Hatch is so good. Marty also, who I commentate with on the on cyclocross. I love Marty to death. He's such a great friend and a great commentator and a gift. Like some of these guys, man, they really put so much energy into it. It's an art. It's an art.
Speaking of bad pronunciations, I'm gonna butcher this race. Bergen, Iserbit stamping on Camp's back wheel.
Yeah, Bergen. Yeah.
So what was going on with that? Like, you probably know both the guys. Like, that looked insane from outside looking in.
I'm not in Belgium on the regular basis. I do have quite a few Belgian friends still. Niels Albert was saying in one of his pieces of written commentary that he felt like there had to be something else that had happened that precluded that. He's like, because having been around, he's like, Ilya Iserbit has been racing for a very long time, and you see this happened once. He's like, yeah, of course things happen over the course of a person's career, especially when they're in the spotlight.
Yeah.
But if someone's getting their wheels stomped, there something happened before. It wasn't just like, oh man, like I didn't think that this was cool the way that you pushed me off to the side. He said it sounded like there was some words were said.
Yeah.
There was some, as Marty would say, argy-bargy going on. Things were happening before that ultimately, built up and led to that, which is still not a great reason. Like, you got to be pro.
But there's an interesting area of law called cumulative provocation. And so it's like, it arose from battered housewives. So they'd come home and the husband would throw a salt shaker at her head, right, and the wife would shoot him in the head. Like, it's clearly not a proportionate reaction to getting a salt shaker thrown at you. So when this came to court, it's like, well, that doesn't represent the totality of what that wife went through, what got her to that moment. It was years of systematic abuse. Right. So the court expanded it to say, actually, we can look at the totality of the cumulative provocation. This is the last act that tipped her over the edge. And I was wondering that with Iserbit going, has this been a niggling rivalry that's been going on for like years? And it's been like nudging, like they hate each other. Because it just wasn't proportionate. Like, it just didn't seem like that's the reaction to getting nudged off.
I mean, the thing I think you got to go back to is the guys know each other pretty well. They've been around each other for their whole lives racing. So more likely than not, it's just they just don't probably get on that well. And then it was the straw that broke the camel's back, or something else that happened over the course of the year, or, you know, there was an opportunity to give him a gel in the road race and he said no, or whatever the thing was. That's just kind of, you know, it's been like, well, that happened in January, and then that happened in, you know, May at the Belgian national road race. And then that happened again. And then, you know, and then I saw him on the road. He didn't wave to me. And it's like, you know, it probably was that. But yeah, you know, still, even with that, Belgians typically have pretty level heads. You know, in general, they're calm, cool, and collected to some degree. I'd say as a culture, like they're not, I don't know. You could argue that, but I was a little surprised.
Do you know how many cyclocross races you won?
Yes, because other people say, but it's weird. If you go back and you said one of them, or you said another one of them, I probably would remember it. They all, you know, meant something at some point.
Like pro cycling stats doesn't really capture cyclocross brilliantly, but I was looking at, I think it was cyclocross 24.
Great resource. Shout out to those guys. I don't know who does the website.
How do they do that?
I don't know. It's so professional now.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
95 victories they have you down for?
Yeah.
Does that sound right?
Yeah. Cyclocross was so popular in the United States during the time that I was coming into it, and there was a lot of UCI races in the United States, and it was you know, from the partners that were on the teams that I was racing for, they were all really enamored with how cyclocross in the United States was growing, and there was a culture around it, and they, you know, pushed me to keep racing in the States. The World Cup wasn't as conducive, especially when I was getting going, and it felt like it was too far. So a lot of the wins are
like geographically too far.
Yeah, in too far of a stretch for my engine. You know what I mean? That combined too. Like I don't think I have any. I think I was always punching above my weight with the biggest riders. You know, Sven Nys and them. You know, occasionally I would make the selection with the big dogs, but it wasn't like oh yeah, I'm gonna show up and then I'll make the front group. It wasn't. Yeah. I was in the conversation sometimes, but it was hard.
But something that's underestimated, and this only landed for me last week, I was chatting to Alex Hales, who absolutely love Alex Hales.
Yeah, great dude.
He's been on the podcast like, I don't know, I'm going to say 5-6 times.
Oh, that's amazing.
Just love chatting with Alex.
Yeah, same. Yeah.
So
we don't text all the time, but he definitely, you know, we pick it up where we left off kind of guy.
He's a dude. He's
a really good dude.
But his performance in, what's the year Sagan won the Worlds? Was it the Richmond World Championships?
Such a good race, by the way.
2012?
He won that like a total big energy boss.
Yeah. But how was, I can't remember his exact result. I'm going to say he was like 12th in the road race that year. He was top 15. It was a ride that he done. But if you contrast that to his other World Championship performances, like they're nowhere near that. But he was saying the part that people don't understand is, like, an American going to Europe is hard.
Yeah, super hard.
He's like, it's so hard. He's
hard.
like, and for the first time, he had all the Euros coming to America. And I was like, now you know my pain. Yeah. Now you know what it's like to be uncomfortable in an environment, to not recognize the food, to not recognize the people, to not recognize, you know, social cues. He's like, all of it adds this cumulative stress that you don't realize.
Dude, I could go on about this for more than an hour. And the thing that the Euros get away with is that there isn't a thing where they have to come and make a life in the United States and then perform. And we just see it time and time again, where the rider from the US has the engine, or from North America has the engine, but just doesn't perform at the same level in Europe, or they do at first, but then they don't over time. And that was definitely the case for me. Truthfully, I mean, after I retired, I did therapy for like anxiety and things like this, not because it was, but just because I felt like there was an alternative to like being anxious. But Europe will make you anxious if you're just there by yourself. When I first went over, I was 19. This guy, Jeff Proctor, who runs the European Cyclocross camp, had invited me to come. I got to know at that time, Noël Dionquera. He was a Belgian that was running the United States national team, and he had invited me over. I was on Jelly Belly, which was a road team from the United States, a Division III road team. And all these things kind of came together, and Noel saw a lot of enthusiasm and promise in me. And he was like, hey, Jeremy, don't go home, just stay. And I was like, okay, because I was only going for a 2-week camp, and I didn't know anything. But man, I was in a rough place when I first went to Europe by myself. I had no friends there, just basically dropped in the middle of West Flanders by myself at 18, 19 years old, and figured it out. But it was lonely as hell. Oh man, it was lonely as hell. And at first I did really well. But Noel was like, he knew it was going to be trial by fire. It's just like, just go for it. You'll be fine and see how you do. And that's the way that he would weed out a lot of kids. But when I came back the next year, he was like, Jeremy, you have to come back 15 pounds less weight. And then for sure, you are really good and you make it happen. And I did. I came back 15 pounds later and he was so thrilled. He was ready to just go all in for me. He had his brother was out there with the motor scooter. We had Chris the Fox was out there. He was like going to the races with me. I had Luigi the mechanic. I had so many great resources that he rolled out the red carpet for. He brought me over to do some of the under 23 road races like Tour of Flanders and stuff. Yeah, it was super cool. I got a huge introduction. And I was like, cool, I'll do 6 months here. Just live here. But gosh, it's hard.
That's changed so much though. Like I'm not saying it's not still hard, but we're looking before the show. We're the same age, basically a couple of months between the two of us.
Okay.
And when I went to France, I was recalling this experience to a new training partner I have at the moment. He's 20, super eager. He's on the way up. You know, he's visions for a world tour. And he's talking about like the transition over to France. He's like, and then he starts talking about like Strava segments and stuff. And I'm like, dude, we didn't have maps on Garmin's back then. He's like, he was looking at me like I was talking about the Victorian era.
Oh, yeah.
He was like, it was blank expression. He's like, well, how did you know where to go for a training ride? I was like, we had a map in the hall and me and the other Irish riders would like go, well, this is a 6 hour route. This is a 4 hour route.
You're bringing back the memories, man.
And you'd have like a list of town names on a piece of paper for your 6 hour ride. Like, okay, I need to hit this town, this town, this town, this town. Here you stop for a coffee, you hit this town, this town.
Yeah, exactly. He'd be like, Ardoye, Dendermonde, Rudevorde, and then there you go right. You're going to see the run punt, and then it's a Rex. You're going to go right. You're like, okay, cool. And then you're lost as hell. It's sleet and snow. You're like, all right, I got to call somebody to come get me. One time, I legitimately got caught out in like sleeting, snow, and hail. And I was so cold. I was getting hypothermic. I literally walked into this bakery. No one spoke English. I spoke zero Flemish. This is OG. And this is like whatever, 2001 or something, 2002. And the woman just looked at me and I was like, I need to go to Izegem. But it was like, that's not exactly how it was pronounced. It was like in West Flanders Flemish dialect. It's like Izegem or oh, yeah. Like it took at least 15 minutes. But she just gave me this little butane heater and gave me a pastry. And I just sat there shivering, just like, oh, da, 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 da. But this guy from like Brussels comes up in this like black Mercedes. And I've got my bike. I take the wheels off. I put it in the trunk and it's like 50 euros or whatever. And I get dropped back off at Noel's like place at the house for this. And I remember like, man, if he finds out that I had to take this home, he's going to be so disappointed. But it all worked out to plan. Like the guy dropped me off. I went upstairs. I found 50 euros that I'd had. It was the only like cash that I'd had with me. I bring it out to him. I give it to him and he like kind of shrugs his shoulders and leaves. And then I'm like there just totally disheveled. Like I'd been so cold. I could not feel anything. And Noel walks in. He's like, how was the training ride? And I'm like, great. Just like I'd rather die than tell Noel that I had to take a cab home because I got lost and felt like I nearly died.
Is that like a rite of passage though for Anglos going to the Euro countries? Because I have such a similar story. Like went on a 4 hour training ride in France. A buddy of mine had come over from Ireland on holidays. I was like, oh, I'll meet you. But he took me out of my loop that I knew. And so he's like, oh, I turn off here for my campsite. I'm like, cool. I ended up like, I'm 10 hours deep into this thing. It's pitch black dark. I'm going through these tiny French towns and I lived in a place called Pons, Pons, but it's pronounced Pont. In France, you don't pronounce the S. So I'd be like, où est la Pons? And people are like, oh, Pons. And after about like 10 villages, like I've given up and I'm scouting out like doorways that I can sleep in because I have no money for a taxi. Don't know how I'm getting home. I've no mobile phone. It's pouring rain. I'm like hypothermic. No mobile phone. And I'm like, one guy, oh, où est la Pons? Like, which way is Pons? And he's like, oh, Pont. And I was like, yeah, Pont. He's like, oh, Pont. I was like, oh, I've been saying that for 2 hours. I eventually made it home. I think like my Garmin had like a 14-hour ride time or something.
Oh, gosh,
absolutely broke and trying to race the next day.
Oh, man. Yeah, these are the stories though. This is maybe what makes cyclists so hard in their minds. Like if you've done it a little bit, then you've been probably in a similar position. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It can be a really hard sport.
And even stuff like the passage of time, like it's changed Garmin's routing, stuff like that. But even nutrition, like the idea of the fueling is now part of being a bike rider is just so obvious to someone now.
Yeah.
I remember racing like, you know, Coupe de France and it'd be 220k, like a old school, like Trobro Leon across fields and stuff. You're coming home, you're making the front group, delighted with yourself, zero food in the house.
Right.
You're like, €1 and I'll get a McDonald's burger, and you're racing 200k again the next day. It's like, how is that good?
It's not. But, it's cycling will teach you a lot of frugality, like being very mindful with the way you spend your money. You know what I mean? I mean, there's so many stories of guys being like, oh, we should take the ketchup packets and mix it with water, and then we just get out there. That's all we could afford. And you're like, okay, it doesn't sound like it was the best idea, but it sounds like it was something.
Yeah, I had the experience in a Starbucks, like squirting honey into a Ziploc bag and licking it out to get me home, like a hobo in the car park.
That's how you do it, man. That's all you can do sometimes. It's, I don't know, like 5-6 guys at a house just trying to make it.
What do you think makes the Euro cyclocross culture so strong in comparison to the US? Like your 95 wins, obviously there's kind of settling in Europe issues that maybe prevented or added to you not winning the big races in Europe, but also there's a standard difference as well. When you get there, like you're the big dog in the US, and then you get to Europe, it's like there's a lot of big dogs. How have they created that culture of just building multiple Jeremy Powers there? Every single generation they're coming through.
There's just a lot of history, you know what I mean? They have so many riders that had won before, and they understood the equipment really well, and they also understand the conditions that they're racing in, and there's a lot of history. There's a lot of journalists writing about it, so there's a path to the top. The riders can see other riders making a living from it. So their pool is much larger than ours is. Do you know what I mean? It's kind of, you look out on and you see like, I don't know, use some analogy like you see like a couple birds. You're like, oh yeah, okay, there's like a couple birds. But then you go and you see a flock of birds. You're like, oh, well, there's going to be so many more people that are likely to make it in cyclocross or whatever. And cyclocross is usually, they just have a bigger pool on the road. They have more funding for road programs. They've got more training facilities. They've got things like, oh yeah, if you want to go on Wednesday night, it's like we do the cross practice that's run by the national team coach. And then the national team coach sees someone talking about Europe here. And it's like, Jurgen de Knecht is like now looking at the next, Dutch superstar just because they showed up at the Wednesday night, sand cyclocross practice where, yeah, in the United States, it might be like, hey guys, did you hear about this rider in Montana, which by the way is a 9-hour flight, that beat all the older riders in the Cat 1 race? And you're like, no. Like, man, well, yeah, there's this 14-year-old kid that did that. You're like, all right, cool. Well, we might see him in 4 months at the national championships. And then like they perform at the nationals. It's like every state in the USA is a country in Europe. You know what I mean? It's just such a big difference in the geography and the way it goes. And these are much closer knit communities with a lot more resources and a lot more focus. There's a lot of sports to do in the US. There's a lot of resources for those sports. So if you pick cycling, you're kind of on your own, and you chose that.
Yeah.
Whereas in Europe, it might choose you. Do you know what I mean? You might be like, dude, you're really freaking good.
And then you create this culture of, I had Olaf Boo on the podcast not too long ago, the triathlon coach, and he was talking about the culture with Gustav, Eden and Blumenfeld, like two of the biggest rivals in the world, yet they train together. And if one of them finds an edge in aerodynamics or fueling, he shares it with the other guy. And I was like, but it's your closest competitor. Like, should you not be guarding that? And he's like, by sharing that and having this collaborative environment, it's just like one up, right. Keep pushing it. And I often wonder, is Belgium like that with cyclocross, where it's like, you're seeing guys going into corners more with cranks level this year than I have before,
interesting.
Which is an interesting one. I'm like, they're all starting to do it around the same time. Is this like, are they able to get back on the power faster out of the corner, or it's something? I'm like, I wonder, has that come from one particular grouping in Belgium, and then it's just.
They do get like that, where one thing is the thing that they're all doing, like, oh, this is like the new, whatever thing that we're eating after the race, or this is the protein shake that's making everybody gain, recover faster, whatever the thing is that they're like choosing. And that's definitely cultural. I mean, I would say that, Wheeler Flitz, HLN, Sporza, these things, the way that they put cyclocross, cycling in general, up on a pedestal in the country allows for so much more adoration of the top riders. It also provides so much more analysis. Everything is scrutinized. I mean, you would never see this level of detail presented in US media anywhere, in English written media. So if you want to be a fan of the sport, it's pretty elusive and hard to figure out. And then you start to talk about like, well, how do you figure out the right pressure for the tubulars, or what are tubulars even? And then you start to go down the list of all of these kind of old things. But today, the resources are actually there, and the riders generally speak English. They have mobile phones. You can send them a DM on Instagram.
Yeah.
It was, when I got there, I remember legitimately like no one talked to me. Do you know how that makes you feel? Like you're not only are you dropped into this like cultural different, like very, very different world, but then also you have no friends and you don't speak the language, and that's exactly how they wanted it. Make it really freaking hard to do it. And I think that's the thing that I think also made me very hard as a cyclist, because you learn to live in a pretty shitty environment. And you choose that, and you're like, I'm going to do it again, because you have a lot of passion for it, because you think you can make it. And so the idea is like, I'll learn Flemish, you know what I mean? Enough. I'll sit in the environment. I'll live in West Flanders. This is like, these are not places that most people would go and be like, hey, I'm going to sign up for that.
No, it's brutal. Like
it's hard.
Belgium's a brutal place.
Yeah, especially in the winter.
I spent a summer in Belgium racing kermesses, and I stayed in a house that had no windows. Yeah. Like, how could a house have no windows? It was like being in a prison cell.
Dude, I mean, I could go on. Yeah, I could go on. I think the thing that I was going to go back to, one thing that I wanted to say when you were talking about like the Europeans coming to the US and racing, and when Alex was like 12th or whatever at the Worlds, the Europeans would come to the US and I would compete pretty well against them. Like one year I won Cross Vegas, and it was a result that I was really proud of. Like I beat a very young Lars van der Haar, but like a lot of Europeans put that race up on pedestal. It was also early season, but I was very comfortable there. None of the anxiousness of being like a turtle out of its shell, which I would experience in Europe. But Europeans would come to the US for 1 week.
Yeah.
And like in the case of the Worlds, like those guys showed up 5 days before the Worlds, and then they ripped it. And then it was like, and they're back on the plane going home. Or like, if you're going to make a living to go to race your bike in Europe, you gotta move there, because that's awesome, because that's where the sport is. And today, look, if you want to make it as a cyclocross racer, you have to go to Europe. There's nothing left for you in the US. Very little.
We are so excited to announce that we are partnering with Whoop. Whoop are changing the game when it comes to wearable technology and health monitoring. Whoop is a wearable health and fitness coach that provides you with feedback and actionable insights into your sleep, your recovery, your training, your stress, and your overall health. Sarah and I have been using Whoop for years, and we love the insights it provides into our body's inner workings. It really gives us a look under the hood. And you're going to see Mathieu van der Poel, Richard Carapaz, and other elite level cyclists wearing Whoop, but it isn't just for those superstars. All the data is personalized to your unique physiology and fitness levels. If you're interested in taking control of your health and your fitness so that you can excel in all aspects of your life, you have to go and check out Whoop. Go to the URL now, which is join.whoop.com/roadman. I'm going to pop that in the description below, and you're going to get a free month's access to Whoop membership on me. Promise you won't regret it. It's interesting. Do you know who Michael de Lagrange is? He runs the Amani project.
Yes.
So I chatted to him, and he had a really interesting take on this, because you get African athletes, they've identified them as super talented physiologically. They're great bike riders. But then because of the economics of it, it's a lot of money for an African rider to come to Europe. So they can't send them to Europe and be like, hey, you have 4 years in Europe to figure this out. Just go and enjoy racing and learn slowly. They go to Europe. It's like, you've got one race to prove yourself in Europe. So you have all the cultural stuff, you've the travel stuff, you look different to everyone else. Yeah. No one's your friend. Yeah. And you're in this like high pressure audition. And if you fail the audition, it fulfills everyone's stereotype going, no, black guys can't race in Europe. They're just not made for it. And then that just builds in that sort of insecurity to the next generation going, oh, but he was so talented and he went to Europe and he didn't make it. Yeah, he had like one bad race. Like, think how bad Remco probably was Remco was maybe a bad example where he won his first race. But, for most guys, they're not very good. They get dropped in their first kermesse. They don't finish it. Oh. But the expectation on the Africans to go there, it's like, you got to win your first kermesse.
Dude. I mean, that's so brutal. I didn't know that is... that is impossible though. I mean, literally, you're just already handed a bad deal. Yeah. I couldn't imagine that. Yeah. I mean, the first kermesse for me, I remember it vividly. I drove in Noel's Ford Mondeo to go to it. Got lost again. Picked up a guy at the local pub who also didn't speak English, and I told him, I was like, "Oh, I'm going to the kermesse or whatever." I said the town name, and he was like. He was trying to tell me the way. He was like, doing the thing with the towns, and then he just looked at me and he kind of like did this motion with his fingers where he was going to get in the car, and I was like, sure. Yeah. So then he got in the car and he drove with me. And it was my first kermesse. And it was not a pro kermesse. It was an amateur kermesse.
Yeah.
But I got ninth.
Oh, that's amazing.
It was. So I get back and I finally make it. But the guy was so stoked. He went there. So I picked him up. He drove with me for like 20 minutes. He was drinking at the bar. He started drinking at the bar. He also gambled on me.
I was about to say, he was probably betting on you and stuff.
I swear this is so true. I'm not making this up. He gambled on me. And when I came off the race course, he had the biggest smile on his face, just like he was so stoked that he got to drive with me to the
He's
race.
probably still telling this story in a pub in Belgium somewhere.
But so I get back and I tell Noel, he's like, Jeremy, how did you do? And I'm like, I got ninth. I made the group. And like I was there, but the guys, they like totally worked against me and they outfoxed me. Yeah. And he's like, Jeremy, it's not possible you got ninth, eh? Tomorrow, the results are in the paper, eh? And I'm like, no, Noel, I got ninth, And he's like, I will see you tomorrow. And he leaves. He just didn't believe it. That's like even in Belgium just being like, it's not possible that you got ninth in your first kermesse, so see you tomorrow because I know you're lying. Bye.
I remember one of my first amateur kermesses over there and somehow just fallen into the break and there's like 12 guys.
Right.
Like,
you get lucky.
On the rivet at the back of this break, I'm like, I can't, like if I do a turn, I'm gone. Yeah. I need to sit on the back of this break. And I'm sitting on the back of the break. Guys are starting to shout. Right. I'm like, I don't know what they're saying, but it's not good. Like it's not good news. And it's just getting louder and louder. All I feel is this smash in the back of my head. It was like getting hit with a house brick. Someone had taken like a 750 mil bidon and pinged it off the side of my head.
They were pissed.
But someone forcefully removed me from the break like a disgruntled nightclub customer. He just got me from the back of the collar and brought me out the back, held onto his brakes, brought me right out the back, let go, sprinted back across. I was like, I've been sufficiently demasculated here.
Oh my gosh, dude. It's brutal. Yeah, the racing there when I was younger was like they got a reputation because they were savages. They were so the European like kermesse scene, and then I don't know. Yeah, I mean, the cyclocross scene was also not that friendly. I don't know. It was a hard way to make it.
It feels like it's gentrifying a little bit. Like the cyclocross series in Dublin. You should come back over for the Dublin race.
I've heard it's cool. Yeah,
it is really cool.
Yeah. The World Cup looks amazing. Super cool course.
It's brilliant. Now I don't know if one of our publications this week published like, Wout van Aert's going to be here for the Dublin cyclocross. And then they're like, we translated the Flemish wrong. We think he's not going to be here for the cyclocross. So we're not sure if he's coming or he's not.
That's amazing.
So Wout van Aert may or may not be here for the cyclocross. But
Wout's a good guy though. You should hit him up. You probably just send him a DM and ask him, and he'd just probably write you back. Like he's weirdly kind of like that.
Really? Yeah.
Yeah, he's a nice guy.
Yeah, I've never met him, but the cyclists are strangely accessible. That was one of the learnings from the podcast at the start. Everyone's like, how'd you get like so and so on the podcast? I was like, I don't know. Like they were pretty easy to get on the podcast.
Yeah, nice guys.
Like the wildest one was Greg LeMond when he emails. And I was like,
very cool.
It's Greg LeMond. And I was like, there's no way that's Greg LeMond. I was like, sent the email address to a few people. Like, no, that's legit Greg LeMond's email. Well, like,
hey Greg, how about this? Show up.
So yeah, like
he comes through the door and you're just like,
4 hours of podcast with Greg LeMond. I was like, this is a surreal.
Wow, man. I have to listen to this one. I'm sorry. I have to be honest. I have to listen. That sounds
Greg
awesome.
LeMond, it's a wild podcast with Greg LeMond. He's some mad theories on. And afterwards, like, we chatted before the podcast and I was like, if we say any dumb shit, like we can edit this out. Like, it doesn't have to be one of us is going to die and get cancelled because of this podcast. So me and Greg talked for, I'm going to say 2 hours, 2.5 hours. And then at the end of it, I was like, hey, Greg, you said some pretty wild stuff in there. Do you want me to chop some of that out? Like he said, Froome motor doped when he won the Tour de France.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, Greg, do you want me to like chop that out? And he's like, no, you did. Leave it in.
Oh my God.
All right.
Oh my God.
It was wild that no one picked up. Like, I don't know, I'm going to say 10 million people have listened to the podcast across YouTube and socials. And
I'm off the back. You consider that done. When I leave here, I'll download that for the plane ride tomorrow. Sounds like an epic episode.
There's two of them. It's a 2-part. So it's like 4 hours.
I feel bad I haven't listened to this.
Yeah, I'm gonna hit you. Sorry. Played you on WhatsApp now with it. When I told a few people you're coming on the podcast, everyone's like, well, you got to ask them the mandatory cyclocross questions that we all want to know the answers to. Like, everyone wants to know tire choice, everyone wants to know tire pressure, everyone wants to know skills, trails.
Sure.
So I feel like we need to do that service to rattle through some of these.
Yeah.
How do we figure out tire choices? Like, because it does feel like a minefield for a lot of newbies starting.
Yeah.
It's just so overwhelmed with tire widths, different tread patterns.
You only need 2 tires. You need, and they should be, so there's like different levels, but if you've got, if you're in Europe, you do yourself a lot of good to have the tubular tires. It's a pain in the butt, but basically like four sets of wheels and one set of mud tires and one set of traditional Griffo tires would put you in a position with 2 bikes that you could, quote, win any race that you lined up to. It's an investment, 4 pairs of wheels. Let's be honest, right?
Yeah.
This is an investment. So I guess the alternative to that would be like, if you want to go tubeless, where you're going to be kind of off the back already to start or on the wrong foot, is that you just won't be able to go as low in the pressure. The ride quality will not be as good. So if you're like, okay, hey, Jeremy, I can't do 4 sets of tires. I'm already out on that. I can't do 4, I can't do 4 sets of wheels, and I can't buy, $400 worth of tubulars, or sorry, $800 worth of tubulars, because you got 2 sets, 2, 4, 6, 8 tires that you're going to need, plus a spare. So you're into it for $1,000 of tires, then you're into it for whatever, $800 a wheel set or something like that. This is expensive.
Yeah.
So let's just say that's out. Then you're like, okay, you get 2 sets of wheels and you get 2 bikes. Each set has them. And then you do, a pair of tubeless tires, and you get a pair of Griffos that is like a, diamond tread half moon chevron pattern. Yeah. It's a very traditional tire. 80% of the races you can race those and do well in, because that tire does well in most conditions. You don't need more than that for cyclocross. And then, after that, if you say like, hey, okay, but here you're going to have a lot of mud, especially in Ireland and Europe, you have a lot of mud. Then you get like a very, a tall knobby tire, like any of the mud tires that will do. But the goal is that the tires have really high lugs, and that when they hit road sections or sections that are pavement or whatever, or, concrete or whatever, that those tires, the knobs on them move when they get onto the road, and then they fling the mud.
That's what they say, to clear the mud.
They clear the mud, but then the thing that also happens is that the bike gets super muddy. But then you need to have someone in the pit to wash the bike, because yes, the tires, throw the mud off and clear themselves so that they can then get traction again. But they also builds up on the bike really heavily. And so kind of between the two of those things, you're like, all right, well, but you can't win without a mud tire. If it's a muddy race, you can't win without the muddy. And then it's all about pressure. And the thing that you realize that the Europeans got right early on was the tubulars. And the reason that the tubulars are so insane is because you can run them at such extraordinarily low tire pressure. You can get so much traction from them, because the mud's always moving under you. And the lower the pressure, then you probably can't see my hand, but the more the tire is moving and molding to the ground. And so you just get this kind of feeling where you can also ride on the rim when you need to. You can just kind of hit the back part of the saddle, make that tire really dig in to just put the power down on the pedals at the exact moment, and you can just get it to be like, no, F it. We're going to get traction now because I need it. Yeah. And I'm willing to put this tire kind of on the rim so that it's just you get that same tire. It's like the tires make everything in cyclocross, because that's all you've got. You don't have suspension, right? You don't have a lot to work with. And there's so much nuance because there's so little tire on the ground. But the wider the tire patch, which is limited in UCI racing in particular, it's 33, right? When you get to that 33 mark, then the only thing that's going to widen it out really is going to be lower tire pressure. The thing that's going to give you more traction is going to be tire pressure. And the only other thing you can do is really lower your cadence. I always describe it as like being on a motorcycle, like a two-stroke dirt bike, right? Where you've got it high in the first gear. Do you know what I mean? Where right? And you're just going to wheel out. You're going to brake. Your tire's going to brake. But if you do it and you get it really low and you start out in second gear and you're like, right, you're going to get more traction.
Yeah.
And so when you start to think about how do I go into this muddy section or whatever, and you see the biggest riders pushing this freaking massive gear. I mean, Van Aert, if you go back to how he rides super low cadence, right? That's cyclocross for sure. If you know how to put pressure down and you know how to do it at a low cadence, you know how to keep the tires, contact patch on the ground, you understand kind of the way that a tubular rides, and you also understand kind of the line that's going to give you the most traction is always going to be on the greenest grass, right? Then you're already light years ahead of someone that's coming into it that's going to burn the line in. We call it ride like pin to pin, where they ride around an obstacle, but they ride to the pin and then they ride to the next pin.
Yeah.
That's not the way you see a top rider ride. You see them go wide, you see them go long. They take a longer line to get more traction, and it's faster. Yeah. So but it defies the way that people think. It's like, oh, I got to go through this. But when you go into a section, you go to the pin, you have to scrub all.
It's like they're carrying speed all the way through the course. Better,
way better. And the thing that I realized at one point, I remember doing this race where I was close to the front group. It was one of my better World Cup finishes, and it was in the Czech Republic. It was in Tabor, and I was dangling on the front group. And I remember Sven Nys broke his chain, And then he went to the pits, so he had to run a bit. He come out of the front group, but I was like maybe 5th, 6th, 7th, something like this. And he come back to me. And he was riding back through. Like he had lost the 30 seconds, and then he got the new bike with the broken chain, and then he went back to was going back to the front group. But I had an opportunity to ride his wheel at race pace.
Like the best apprenticeship you'll ever do.
A super fast race. And he outrode me. He out-cornered me. He out-tractioned me. And I remember thinking like, shit, it's not because the power output I think I actually did have. I think I actually had enough power to ride with them. I was doing insane numbers at that time, like really, but some of my best. And so I wasn't totally surprised that I made the group because the power output was there, but he out technically rode me.
Yeah.
And I remember just being like, man, every single day from here on out that it's raining or that I have the chance to train off-road, I'm going to go do that because if the power isn't the problem, but the technique is the problem, I can actually fix that. So it really pushed me on. So I know that's a weird way to get to. There's so much nuance in the tires and in the selection, and it does really pay in cyclocross to have a great pair of tubulars. And if I were making one suggestion, I'd say if you can only get one set of tubulars, get a pair of either FMBs or Dugast, their traditional tire with the chevron pattern. Have one pair, and for many of the races, you'll be good to go, and you'll just be at such an advantage to have a nice pair of tubular tires. So just buy one, and then make all your other wheels tubeless and do whatever you're going to do. But
gravel's had such a boom in the last few years. So a lot of people are sitting on gravel bikes and they're like, oh, I wonder, could I chance my arm at a bit of cyclocross? Like, what's is it the geometry slightly different on the gravel bike?
But usually a lot more lax.
I think you can make it work for...
You can make it work. There's bikes that are more in the middle. Like Orbea has a bike that's sort of in the middle on the geometry. The thing that you'll get with a purebred cyclocross bike is the geometry will be sharper. The BB will be higher. If you go back to a Ridley's geometry, they always really capitalized on the head tube angles and having a really stable machine with a pretty generally high bottom bracket, which would be great for not hitting your cranks on off camber sections or for punching the bike back up to speed, or for the type of layup of carbon that was used. All of these things sort of made cyclocross bike just handles and turns really fast on sharp things. A gravel bike is going to take a lot. It's going to be a more gentle ride with more lax. It's going to have a higher front end. They made it so you could ride it 4 or 5 hours. If you're listening to this, if you've ever done a 5-hour, endurance gravel ride on your cyclocross bike and then done it on one of the new age, gravel machines, you're like, oh, I know why people buy gravel bikes.
Really?
They're just, your lower back knows too. It's just, they're just sharper and, they don't ride with the same, plushness, I guess. That's how I describe it. Like I just rode my gravel bike the other day. I have a couple of them, and the ride quality is so much nicer than riding your cyclocross bike for 4 hours.
Well, like especially we were talking about Alex Howes a while ago. He was saying his hobby. Some people collect wine. Some people are into cheeses. He's like, my hobby's talking about tires.
Oh yeah.
He's like, I'll talk about tires all day long.
Oh yeah, I could too.
But he was saying it's gone so wide. Like he's like, as wide as you think tires are gone, they're wider. It's like 55 now. It's they're running mountain bike. I don't even know how that works on the internal width. Like they're running 1.1, 1.2 mountain bike tires on road rims. I don't even know how that sits with the internal rim widths. Like if they're just going to roll off these wheels.
Well, yeah. I mean, I did a stint for a few years at GCN, and I always told Simon Richardson that if you needed more than an X amount of tire, like you just weren't that good. Yeah. Because like you kind of get a little bit blind at some point. Like if you're running a 55 tire on a gravel bike, my opinion coming from a cyclocross background is that that's slow. Do you know what I mean? I'm like, oh, that's slow. But I've been hearing more and more from like the Keegans of the world, the really
the
top
data's
riders.
not saying it's slow.
The data's not saying it's slower. And I have to believe those guys. They are the guys that I would listen to. So like, my experience is that, hey, if you ride a 30C cyclocross tire, and the reason that I think that this may be true is that in cyclocross, you need to punch the bike back up to speed. Over and over, 10, 12, 15, 20 times per lap. And so having a smaller tire, it definitely feels faster for sure. You know what I mean? Yeah. To get it back up to speed. And it's always that, when we come off canty brakes, when we went to discs, it's like, oh, this is so slow. All this weight to get the bike back up. But then everyone had them and we all were like, it's fine. Like everyone's on disc brakes now. So it's all even playing field. But on the gravel bike, I guess once you have the bike up to speed and you don't have to do so many speed changes, and you get the rotational weight of going downhill with it as well. That probably is what's pushing those riders to say like, no, we get the added security. We get better ride quality from a bigger tire. That's a fact. And we can modulate the pressure and there's not as much risk. It's like that for me,
I think you touched on it there. I think a factor that people are underestimating is the added security. Because if you take a race like Unbound, Big Sugar, they're big bunch races for like at least the first half of the race. There's selections that are 20 plus riders. If you've ridden a gravel race, you're going like 35, 40k an hour now on gravel races. There's clouds of dust in your face. You can't see holes. You're sitting tight on the wheel. Someone pings around a hole at the last minute. You're like, boom, into it. I want to hit that on a 55 rather than a 32.
Yeah, I was thinking more like a 40 something, like a 45. That felt like
I wrote 47 and I just feel like you with cyclocross tires, I'm like, if someone's asking me like, oh, I need gravel tires are so complicated, it's like, just get a Pathfinder 47. You'll ride like 95% of the races on that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I guess I can't remember the exact width, but like, Pirelli sent a lot of tires back in the day and they're like mid 40s. And I'm always like, man, if you need more tire than this, like what is going on? But I hear you on the sharp, we call it shale stone, where it's very sharp and you can't see. And it's probably even a race like Unbound, it starts in the dark. So there's just a lot going on there where you're like, yeah, I get it. If you're going to go out for a 12-hour ride, the last thing you want to do is in the first hour, shred a sidewall on a tire. So in this way, it's like, yeah, okay, over the duration, even if the data's not saying it, perception is that it's a little slower. Like, but the security is there. So if you have to spend 5 minutes changing out a tire or worse, then you're already ahead.
And especially with Lifetime Grand Prix, like I think Kimo Seymour and the guys have done such an amazing job, the Lifetime series. But there's so few races in the Lifetime series. Like you flatten one race,
and that's it.
Like you can only miss one from the series to count towards your overall. So if you start flattening in a couple of races, like Alexi Vermeulen had some bad luck this year in some races, and he turned around at the end, but like I think he was second the previous year in the series overall, and this year like he's nowhere. He just had bad luck in like Chattanooga and a couple of races back to back, and it's like you only need bad luck like twice, and your whole season is done.
Yeah. It's I always say there's more bike races, but when you're in a series and that's the series that you're focused on, it stinks when you have like whatever luck comes your way. It's not fun.
You still love cycling. Like it's so clear in your the way you light up when we're talking about tire choices, and like you're geeking out on it still.
I was talking with Maglie Rochette and David, her husband, and they said that I have kind of taken myself with Whoop, where I work at Whoop now, and the job's busy. You're doing a lot of things, and we're in a lot of different sports, and I am not as public. Like I'm not always on Instagram, and I'm not talking about riding these epic rides or racing these races or whatever. I'm more talking about my family and what I'm up to nowadays if I do post on social media. So I to some people it's like, man, you've kind of fell off the face of the earth. And in other ways it's but then they hear me on the commentary for cyclocross the weekend. They're like, he still loves it. And that's exactly what David and Maggie said. They were like, we listened to you do the commentary. Like, yeah, he still loves it. And I do read a lot, and I'm still a huge fan of the sport. And I always was. I always had a lot of adoration for, it's a hard sport, but I think that's what makes it kind of beautiful. Do you know what I mean? It's a passion. You can't make it in cycling if you don't love it. That's the truth for everybody. You really, to make it, but even to be a fan, you have to. It's not easy. You probably have to use a VPN to watch some races. You probably have to use Google to translate some article that you want to read about, Remco getting offered $10 million by Bora or whatever the drama is. But, this is not so easily available, and you have to work hard to be a fan, which is kind of a great and a bad thing.
Did you struggle with a loss of your identity when you retire? That transition, like it looks smooth on paper, and I'm sure when you're applying for your Whoop job offer, it looks super joined up, but the noise is what we all experience, and when we're doing one thing and to get to the level you got to, it's single focus. You can't be running a startup, building this other thing, having really meaningful relationships, and be one of the best riders in the world. But when the thing you put all your energy into disappears, it's like, who is Jeremy? Yeah, he was a bike rider. Now who is he? Bike riding isn't there.
I think the hardest thing to probably try to explain on this is not easy. You got to peel the onion on this one. This is like a hard thing, and I think the thing that's hard for a rider that makes a living doing this is the experiences and the adoration and then doing what you love for work. And then the experience is like, of course there's like financial part of it too, where you start out and then, when you make that transition, not only are you walking away from all of those things that you were when you were a pro, and all of those experiences are going to go, you're going to get less of them, but you're also going to probably step down a lot, right? You're going to be just a regular person in the world. And, when I retired, just to be clear, I went to Global Cycling Network and Eurosport and at that time Discovery. And I was doing, a lot of front facing YouTube work, commentary, podcasting, all front facing. So when I stopped racing, literally the next day I was just like, I work at GCN now,
Yeah.
which was cool because I needed to keep my mind busy. I needed to keep going. Of course I did do therapy. In fact, I had 2 therapists at one time to transition myself from the life that I was living as a pro to prepare myself. I had started this process. I had known that I was going to retire, and I'd made a deal with myself that it was time because my motivation was getting lower for suffering like this. My body was not happy with me, and I wasn't performing at the level that I wanted. And it was like some revolting going on with like how much I was training and what I was trying to push for. I had a young family, just had my son. It was time, and I wasn't competing at the international level anymore. Yeah. So all those things led up to it. But I started to do the therapy. I started to do meditating. I started to think about what life would be like. And I started to take calls like the one from GCN, from Simon Richardson and this gentleman, Mike, that, was over there. And we came to an agreement. And I was like, this sounds like an awesome place for me to land. I wanted to do content. I wanted to get out there more. And so I kept myself busy. But I think the thing that you don't realize is that, yes, you die a little bit when you stop racing because it's so much part of your life.
Yeah, there's a saying that every athlete dies twice.
That's true. Yeah.
I think that is true.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah. It's hard. And it's a big part of the way that you move in the world. But I think the thing that is so hard to understand is that when you have those experiences in this beautiful life, you have to go back to the gratitude for what you did get. You can't go back to, well, this is who I am all the time, because the world isn't going to treat you like that. Yeah. At Whoop, I'm Jeremy, the dude that runs sports marketing. I'm not Jeremy, the guy that won these bike races. I would say most people probably do not know that I was a pro bike racer. Truthfully.
And the adoration isn't normal. Like that level of adoration isn't normal for like your average Joe that's listening to this podcast. I don't even think humans are set up to deal with that much attention.
Yeah.
Like you go to a bike race, people want your autograph. They want pictures with you. There's thousands of people cheering you on at a bike race. Yeah. And you have this for year after year after year. And then it's like, boom, quiet. No one's cheering your name. No one's asking for autographs.
Right.
Like that, we're not set up to deal with that.
It is a transition. But you've got to be humble. And you've got to understand that, everything runs its course to some degree. I mean, I had a day in the life show called Behind the Barriers.
I've never seen that.
Oh yeah, it was fun. Good. I haven't listened to the Le Mans podcast, and you
haven't
listened to Behind the Barriers, which is amazing. That makes me happy. But at one point the show was like pretty popular, and we would have a line of people when we would come to the booth in the morning, and so we had to start going earlier to the races to appease, right? Selfies or pictures or sign things and do things. Because if I didn't do that, then those people would, of course, felt like they missed out. We were in a moment, and there was a lot of adoration and excitement around the racing. But I also didn't want to let those people down, those fans that were coming out to get those autographs or to take those photos. I always felt like I had a duty to do this. But it also started to impact the race. Like we had to show up early. Yeah. You know what I mean? We had to start to come earlier, and we had to do these things. And I think when you get to live that, you feel a real sense of pride for the thing that you're doing and for the way that I wanted to always talk about the community, not just myself. I wanted to bring people through the racing and through the environment and through how, the cyclocross scene was growing and the culture around it, and to get more people excited about racing it and feel the same passion that I had for it and feel like they were a part of it. And so that also, I think in my own little world felt like, I had gotten enough of that when I was leaving, and I was okay with that. Do you know what I mean? Like when I stopped, I was like, man, I feel like I did it. I raced the races I wanted to do. I told the stories that I wanted to tell. I showcased the sport in the way that I thought it was best to be showcased. So I felt very full, like my heart was full from it, and I'd done all the things I wanted to do. I think where my friends that have retired, that have had the hardest time leaving the sport, are the ones that felt like they didn't get to do everything they wanted to do.
Yeah.
And that part of it for me is also, I feel for them a lot. Like either they didn't make the amount of money they needed to set themselves up, or they didn't win the races that they were so close. You know how fickle, like it could be one bad move on the chessboard and you didn't win that race that would have changed your career. Yeah. And man, you hang on to that. How many guys are in the peloton today that have been perennial second or third places, but if they had won those races, they would have been gods.
Oh, it's like photo finishes. Dude. You look at the difference in a photo finish can change someone's life.
And that type of, I'm going to curse, sorry. Your kids cover yours. But that kind of shit sits on you for a long time. You replay that in your head so many times about what could have been and what should have been. And you're like, man. And so when you leave, you know, the reason I said the therapy is because like I really wanted to deep dive for myself to feel like I could go back into the world with kids. Like I don't want to bring them through. I don't want to hang on to all these things. So I just talked it out in a way that didn't feel like it was, I needed to do it on a podcast, or I needed to do it somewhere else in a public forum. Like I just need to get right with myself. And then it comes back really for me to the gratitude, because it doesn't happen on its own.
So powerful. Like I think we all know it's powerful, but we just don't do it enough.
If I meditate, then I go to gratitude automatically. So if I do it, I'm not saying like, I'm some like, Tibetan monk or something, like meditate every day for hours. I don't want to say that. Like I use it as a tool, but it does bring me back down to square one where I'm like, man, I'm just really grateful. And if I can go to that place, then I can be so happy for the things that I have and for the experiences that I had. And I can leave my other chapter of my life behind and move forward. And it makes me feel like I got through. But yeah, some of the guys I feel bad for, because it's really hard to make the transition.
Roadman, whether you're a weekend warrior or a world tour rider, the right tools can make all the difference. Enter 4i's Precision 3 Plus Power Meter, the latest innovation from 4i, designed to help you reach peak performance. The Precision 3 Plus Power Meter is a compact yet powerful unit. It weighs just 9 grams and it's packed with features that set it apart, including integration with Apple's Find My network, giving you the peace of mind by letting you track your power meter wherever it is. Plus, you've got up to 800 hours of battery life. We all know that accuracy is key, and 4i's delivers a groundbreaking plus or minus 1% accuracy thanks to their unique 3D strain gauge technology. For those seeking even more data, the Precision 3 Plus Pro Power Meter offers dual-sided power meter metrics, giving you detailed insights into pedaling efficiency, torque effectiveness, and left-right balance. 4i's offers versatile product options to suit your needs. Choose from ride-ready power meters with pre-installed units on Shimano cranks, or up for factory-installed power meter, where you send in your crankset for a custom installation. Ready to elevate your cycling game? Trust 4i's Precision 3 Plus Power Meter. Precision, performance, and peace of mind all in one. Learn more by visiting 4iiii.com. That's 4iiii.com. I'm going to put that in the description down below. When you're talking about creating the content at the Behind the Barriers show, was there a part of you that felt like the experience of being a cyclocross racer or just being a bike racer is now somehow getting diluted by feeling the need to showcase being a bike racer? Like, let me even give it by way of an example. So I went bikepacking this year with a few friends, and we have like an annual tradition. One of my buddies, an ex-full-time rider as well, and another friend, and we head off and we go bikepacking. This year we pick more bizarre places each year. This year we went kind of Albania, Bosnia, Slovenia. Wow. We ride like long every day, like 200k a day, but then go on the beer every night. And people were sending me messages nonstop because I talked about it on the podcast and going on this bikepacking trip. They're like, oh, like make Instagram content about it. And I was like, it feels, I need to be present to the experience. And although making the content might inspire someone else to have their own experience, which is a positive, I feel like it takes away from my experience. And I had this internal conflict of like amplifying the message versus being authentic to the moment.
Yeah, so that's super true. I had a great friend to me, Sam Smith, who followed me around with a camera and basically was always being a fly on the wall. And I think the thing that made Behind the Barriers cool, I like to think, I think it was cool for a bunch of reasons, but
can you call it cool? Yeah.
But it was really just authentically me. I'm almost overly honest, to a fault, actually. And so I think that's probably what brought people in, was that authenticity and that honesty and just being real about everything. Like, hey, yeah, I'll do this thing, or I have this this thing that's going on with me, or this frustration point, or this race was one that I put up on a pedestal, but I completely failed.
Yeah.
And then you wear it on your shoulder, but in a way that's very vulnerable. People can make a decision, and they did. Like people for sure probably listening is probably like, I don't like that guy for whatever reason. You know what I mean? But to go back to your thing is being in the moment. It's when I was with GCN, you almost can't enjoy a ride if you have to film it. And to make a good film, we'd say if we're going to do a 4-hour ride, minimum it's going to take 8 hours. Yeah. Right. And that is a very different experience than going out on a 4-hour ride with someone videotaping you and getting your experience. Do you know what I mean? Because like, no, I'm just doing what I do. And then, you're getting the content. Whereas if you're making the content physically with your phone and with this and that, it's taking so much longer, and you just can't be that enthusiastic for that long about your experience. It's hard. It's hard to do content today, and the level is high, man.
What was GCN like? Did you enjoy it?
Yeah, I love those guys. Those guys are cool. They talk about passion, man. Dan Lloyd and Cy, you got to love it if you've done it as long as they do. And I think about their contribution. I think a lot of today, it's like, yeah, they have to redo content that they've already done or make it fresh. And so for some people it's redundant, but ask anyone that gets into the sport where they found out how to change a tire or how to do things. Their contribution has been insane.
But I don't know the guys super well. I don't know them at all, but like just being a fan of watching them. And I think they're so good off script. Yeah. So like if you watch them on commentary, they're so good.
Yeah.
And I often wonder that with GCN, like GCN tries to make them into actors. They give them a script and they read the script. I'm like, I want to hear them. I want to hear their personality. That's where I don't know. I feel like it's missing that. It needs that injection of authenticity into it for it to just, connect with us a bit more. It feels quite transactional. I'll use it to figure out how to index my gears. Right. But I don't really fall in love with the host because I don't get to know them. I get to know the scriptwriter behind them.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, I wrote a lot of scripts at GCN. It's twofold. You can go off script and kind of ad lib a bit and just make it your own. And I would do that a lot. So when I was with GCN, I had a really hard time because I've never really did a great job when I was script writing. I could do it, but it wasn't my passion to write scripts. My passion was to describe the culture and to be kind of more slapstick and just take it as it is. So I would often find that but I would use a little prompter occasionally, especially if it was really long. Like I needed to know the exact type of aluminum that this wheel was made with this tech and this spec. I would use a small prompter that I would put all of the details in, but then I would just kind of go off and do my own dissertation on whatever it was that we were doing. But the tech side of things was a challenge for me when I was there. But those guys are talented, but they're also great script writers. And I'd say, in my experience, some of their best content was when they were being just themselves.
It was the early stuff with like Matt Stevens, Cy, Dan Lloyd. It was all brilliant.
Eating on the bike. Yeah, these pieces of content are insane.
But that stuff is brilliant.
Legend.
How did GCN Plus disappear? Like that was such a good resource for the community.
The cycling rights land. It's weird. Even with Behind the Barriers when I was there, I felt like other media came in and took over and was doing a better job. And so there was a higher level, which is what you want, right? You create something, you're like, okay, I want it to be better. I want to fill this gap that I personally believe in that is not being filled. And then, GCN Plus was this thing where it was like, okay, we need to get better content out there and we need to make it more, available to more people. I think just GCN was a moment in time. I think everybody would agree that GCN Plus was a great for cycling enthusiasts. Was just the absolute best resource for us. You know what I mean? But when you think about it, if you're in the Mountain Bike World Cup and then Warner Brothers comes in and says, yeah, but we can put you into 26 million homes linear, not a few 100,000 people digitally, right? When we can put you into 26 million homes linear, meaning like when you turn on your TV, you can watch the Mountain Bike World Cup or you can watch the Tour de France. That's the scale. And that's what cycling, and that's what the UCI and these things, that's where the rights holders want. They want to see big numbers because at the end of the day, the more people watching the sport, right, the more ability to have access to it globally is going to put more money into it. It's going to bring in larger sponsors. It's going to allow the riders to make bigger contracts, right? At the end of the day, this is entertainment. It's sport and entertainment. And entertainment needs a model to survive. And it comes down to a very backwards model in cycling where it's, get your big sponsor, get your title sponsor, and then hopefully it's like, it works good, right? Hopefully you win, Sky wins the Tour or whatever, right? This is the way that those thoughts are being made. GCN Plus in particular, to answer that question, right? When they got spun off from Warner Brothers, that ultimately those rights went with them. I'm not saying that they'll never come back, but it'll be hard. It will take a long time to take those rights back.
This is interesting because this is kind of moving into your current role in marketing now and understanding the economics of the sport, which we didn't do for a long time very well. It's kind of something I'm fascinated about because I think what you touched on there is like, I nearly classify it as a depth versus width. Yeah. I think there's still a lot of value in the depth of a connection. Like if a lot of people are tuning into the entire race, we don't do a good job at assigning that a value. We look and go, well, there's way more people watching now, but it's like, is it my dad watching at home where he watches 10 seconds of it and then flicks back to the football, or he watches at halftime during the football game for 5 minutes just so he has a bit of a conversation piece with me at dinner? Oh, I watched the cyclocross race earlier on. Like, did you? But that goes down as an impression. It goes down as a view. Sure. But it's different to the cycling fanatical fan who's putting it into the WhatsApp groups and he's like, oh my God, you see, it's just after trashing Camp's back wheel and he's creating memes and he's posting on social media. The width versus depth is interested in, influencer land as well at the moment because you've stuff like TikTok. It can get, 100 million views on someone slapping their cat. It doesn't mean it's a meaningful connection.
Yeah. It's a big question with an answer that I probably won't do it justice. It's like, the thing is that it's not better, it's just different. I think it's like the only thing I could really come up with for this. It's just like, okay, getting your content on Max or on Eurosport Player or on D Plus or whatever thing you have here. For us, it's Max now. So all the content that was on GCN is now on, HBO Max. And if you're in Canada, it's still on Flow Sports. And if you're in, here, what do you watch on?
Discovery Plus.
There you go. So D Plus, right? So there's all these different things. The rights just got chopped, but really the same big players own a lot of the cycling media landscape here. It's I don't think it's necessarily better. I think it's just business being business, man. They had the rights, they took them, they own them, and they're going to use them, and they're going to try to build their own thing now.
Is Whoop now the perfect intersection for you of being involved in sport? Like we didn't get to ride, but even looking at you, you're still fit. You still care about health. You still care about anti-aging. You still care about, everything that you once did. Is Whoop that nice intersection for you to express multiple different desires and wear multiple different hats in one go?
Yeah. It's cool. I found a cool job. I mean, I live generally close, an hour and a half from the office. I have a young family. I got a daughter that's 4, my son's 7. So like between the two of them, I'm busier moving and shaking with the family stuff. And Whoop is very much a corporate job. We're a young company, startup-esque. We have a lot of employees, but we're still always, I feel as though, punching above our weight. Like we are not Google. We are not Apple. We're going up against really big Goliaths, and that have, of course, more resources, but also more staff and more people. For me, I've found a place that I can really use my skills that I learned as being, of course, a bike racer and an athlete in general, just, blanket term. But then also as, content creator at one time and, dabbled with entrepreneurship and things like this. And then you find yourself at Whoop, which is kind of I get to combine a lot of those skills that I learned. And it's been a great fit for me. I get to stay in touch with a lot of the athletes. I get to, sponsor, put money into the sport. And as a marketer now, there's a return on investment and I need to, we value those things certainly. And we look at them, but I think there's also a lot of passion for cycling across the org. We have a lot of people that have a ton of passion for it. We've got a bikes channel. There's a lot of people that commute to work. I mean, people follow the sport within inside Whoop. And I think that gives me a lot of, of ability to do things, to move and shake.
But it's also amazing that Whoop exists. Like, it's amazing that Whoop is on my arm in an entrepreneurial landscape where you're not talking about the biggest players in a niche. You're talking about competitors being the biggest companies in the world. For sure. Like, I'm wearing a Whoop long before, like I've been wearing a Whoop, I'm going to say since like 6 or 7 months into the company making Whoop available. I've been wearing it since then. But every day you choose to wear it, it's a choice not to wear an Apple Watch. It's a choice not to wear a Garmin watch, not to wear a Samsung watch. They're huge companies. Like, how does it even exist?
Well, our CEO, also one of the founders, Will Ahmed, he's a very smart guy, very passionate guy, very driven person. And I think that his vision was always to be I don't want to put words in his mouth.
Do it.
No. But I think that he had to pick a place to hang out in. And that place was no distractions, right? Was not being what those other products were. And I think we've consistently whittled away at a point. We've gone after, world-class performers. We've gone after athletes. We've gone after health. We've gone after sleep. Whoop isn't a product that tells you a lot unless you want to know it. You have to go into your app and choose to know what you want to know. An Apple Watch, a Samsung Watch, a Google, they're going to ping you to death. They're going to tell you how you get an email. You can get your Uber on there. You can get, how many steps you got. You can do all these. For so long, we have never had a watch face. We've not had a digital. It's no distractions. It will not tell you something you don't want. The most we'll do is wake you up with a little vibration on your wrist. Feature on it. Do you know what I mean? Like we'll just basically just give you a little vib and just be like, hey, here you go. We won't push you to be constantly antagonized with alerts and information that you don't find useful. We won't tell you things if you don't want the notifications. So in the case of like how a product like ours differentiates ourselves, we've been able to go up against these bigger Goliaths with a very unique proposition, which is that we aren't the same thing. And I would say where those products have completely different business models, they're focused on a lot of things. And we have a hyper focus towards to a certain group of things, which we have put up on a pedestal: sleep, health, longevity, learning about yourself. To be on Whoop, you have to want to learn something about yourself. If I take a vitamin D supplement, does this change something? And you put it in the journal and it'll start to tell you like, hey, Anthony, when you take vitamin D, when you wear earplugs, when you wear an eye mask, when you do these modalities, you're getting 30% more REM sleep. You should do more of that.
I literally had this conversation this morning just before you came. I was sending a voice note to a friend of mine, and he was saying he noticed that in the off season, he assumed his heart rate variability was going to jump in the off season. And all year he'd been quite suppressed because he's training hard. And then he figured when I take 2-3 weeks off, it's going to jump and I'm going to have higher heart rate variability. And I was like, bro, you need to use the journal. It's not that simple. It's like there's multiple confounding factors that influence heart rate variability. And now you're not training, but what's been the natural displacement of you not training? Like the training's gone out of your day, but has that been replaced by higher stress activities? Has that been replaced by less focus on nutrition, more focus on family, more focus on work? It's like the only way to start to unpack this, because we can't conduct the bro experiment. It's too expensive. There's too many variables. You need to use the journal feature and say, hey, I slept well, I use CBD a bit, I used an eye mask, and then you can start to draw these meaningful conclusions. But I'm getting to a question with this one. If we get you to take your metaphorical Whoop hat off and you put your athlete hat back on, do you think you can draw meaningful insights from Whoop to change your training plan on a day-to-day?
Not on a day-to-day. Whoop would be the third person in the room. If you had you were making a decision. Your coach was looking at your files, looking at whatever data set is there. And then Whoop was also something that was going to tell you to confirm or not that bias that you may think you have. I woke up, I don't know, maybe it's my allergies, or maybe I just slept crooked on my neck, but I don't feel quite right. It's like, all right, well, why don't you take a look at your metrics? And it's like, okay, well, I'm within my baseline normal. And you're like, okay, so then I'm going to go out and I'll start my spin and I'll see how my legs feel. And then you get out there and you're like, okay, but if you woke up and you didn't have that, you might say like, I just feel like shit today and I'm going to go and take an easy day. And you might, if you look at that over the course of 365 days, that might happen 20 times. So you might have missed 20 days of training. Whoop for me is not a day-to-day product. HRV training, it's more of a macro. It's a bigger, wider aperture that you need to look at the data set in. And when you start to realize that I woke up in the red, if you had the whole week in the green, but you just woke up in the red because you had to get up early, it's like, yeah, okay, that you're still flying.
Yeah.
You are ready and prepared. We have riders win Tour de France stages in the red But the data, if you just looked at it at face value, oh, I was in the red, I wasn't good today, that would not paint the picture.
Yeah.
It's like any tool, a power meter, a lactate meter, whatever other things we've got, all of these tools need to have a way to basically tease out the data and to look at it objectively with education. You can't just say that, in Whoop, for what it's amazing at is that it does just give you a red, yellow, green. So you do have a sense like, oh yeah, I did do these things and it's helping me. But you really do need to know how to use the tool in order to break it down. And I think that's the thing that's hardest at Whoop is trying to teach people. It's a deep app. There's a lot of stuff in it.
Yeah.
But try to teach them to understand how to read the data and to understand the data set.
Well, that's why I've been kind of thinking about using my Whoop, where I'm telling friends how to use it. I look at it almost like a trifecta. So, most of us listening to the podcast are probably using Training Peaks if we're using their training. I think Dirk and the guys do a great job over there. So you're looking at your Training Peaks in collaboration with your coach. You're looking at the usual stuff, CTL, ATL, TSB, all that nerdy stuff. Then you're like actually checking in with yourself, old school, Joe Friel, pen and paper, like how motivated do I feel to train today? How good do my legs feel today? How well did I sleep today? How irritable am I today? Mm-hmm. And then on the third level, now you're looking at heart rate variability. Now you're looking at sleep data. And if you can get like a confluence of the three, like TSB is looking horrible. I feel like I'm overreaching on ATL. I'm waking up with no motivation to train, poor appetite, high irritability. And then you look, heart rate variability is also down. Now it's maybe a time to say, hey, the 4-hour endurance ride I had today maybe needs to become a recovery ride. Okay. But I definitely see people that are too reactive with it as well, where it's like, oh, my heart rate variability is down, I should take a rest day. It's like, well, do you feel bad?
Yeah. Yeah, I would look at Whoop. I always say, I think we as cycling enthusiasts and people, on this podcast, especially that are listening, but even in other sports, you can quantify output in a pretty significant way. Like you don't have to worry about how many kilojoules you put out or what your training stress score was or whatever metric that you use. We can measure that fairly well in a lot of sports through so many different means. I think about Whoop more as the tugging of the reins, pulling you back.
Yeah.
The best coaches that I had over my career when I was racing were the ones that said, you're doing too much. You did an extra 40 minutes of whatever.
You were obviously super motivated.
And dude, and you need to, like, tomorrow, the next 2 days are off now because of that. Like, you're punished for that. Yeah. You're going to ride an hour and that's it. And just go and sit. And because they knew, because they had the spidey sense, right? This wasn't some AI. This wasn't something. They just knew that, like, I was going to overcook the caboose. Whoop is actually the best thing that we do is tell you that you're doing too much. And it's so plain in sight. You had a rest week and every single day you did a 19 strain. Dude, you screwed it. You screwed yourself. You dug the hole deeper when you were supposed to be sitting on the couch. I see this so frequently. It's a rest week and the coach wants to see what was the strain of the day. The whole strain is 18, 19 every day. What did you do? I told you to be resting. Well, I walked down. I did do a hike with my buddies, but the coach didn't know that. I took my dog. We ended up, it wasn't supposed to be, but it ended up being a 3-hour hike with the dog. It's like, dude, you were supposed to be playing video games and like reading and like taking a rest so that you can build the foundation, right? You can do a build of 3 weeks or 4 weeks, and then you take a week off so that it marinates, so that you get stronger. And then your blood, your body, everything feels better. And then you do another 3 weeks and you build. It's like building, it's like brick on top of brick on top of brick, the foundation of your year. It's when you're a pro, you find out that like someone's season implodes, and it's, truthfully, most of the time it's like, yeah, you showed a lot of promise, but you had bad management. Yeah. You had the talent, you had the head for it, you had the blood work, you had the altitude camp, you did all this thing, but you screwed it up by doing too much.
Yeah, it's like 1% too much is way worse than 10% too little.
Dude. And the thing is it's Whoop will tell you the 24/7 picture. It'll tell you how you didn't get into bed at the right time. It'll show you that your sleep consistency was crap. It'll show you that you were supposed to be on a rest week, but you were at a 19 strain every day. These are the things. It's not, like I said, we can quantify how hard you went on the bike. We know you did, we know you did 800 or 850 kilojoules an hour, right? We got that covered, but it's the other 18 hours of the day or whatever that is really interesting. And I think from a coaching perspective, most of the riders that I do, it's not how hard you went with Whoop. It's how little it can show you did to get you to your goal.
So where do you think it's going next? Like, with Training Peaks and cycling being such a priority for Whoop, do you think it's going to start having like a two-way API. At the moment, Whoop is sending data to Training Peaks, and you're kind of looking at it and going, hey, my activity was too high when I should have been on a recovery week. But it's not pulling across normalized power and stuff and feeding that into my strain for the day, which would be, I would guess, a more accurate way to capture my daily strain. You think that's on the horizon, or is that they want to keep them siloed?
I would say priorities wouldn't speak to that being something that's in the near future anyways. I do think there's a world where we get a lot more accurate with how we look at calories, not just based off of cardio. I'd be kind of speaking out of turn if I said how the roadmap was going to look for what we bring up. So I don't want to speak out of hand here and put myself in a peculiar spot. I would say though that the integration with Training Peaks absolutely is like ripe for a improvement, and that feels like will happen at some point. I would say too that the way that Training Peaks today works is that we kind of bring the data in so that a coach can see it, but it's not plottable. I think those things probably are realistic to get changed. You know what I mean? Where you can look at a lot of your Whoop data inside of another walled garden. But today, coach would need to go into your Whoop account to see all of your Whoop metrics.
Yeah.
And there's probably a chance that we would open that up more for a partner like Training Peaks, or, open these things. But bring power data into Whoop. I would say Whoop already today paints a fairly accurate picture. Like it's the old idea of like your power meter is off by a certain percentage. Like it's like, well, my power meter is telling me that I'm doing 400 watts up the climb every day. It's for 5 minutes, right?
It's my favorite power meter.
but you're actually doing 420.
Yeah.
But your power meter is just off by 5%. It's like, okay, but it's the same every day. Whoop is definitely painting the picture in the same way every day. Whether it's getting every single minute detail perfectly, it is basing it off the same data every single day. So when you use it consistently, you're going to get a picture painted that's going to be consistent. So it's going to say like, hey, today was a 20.7 strainer, today was an 18 strainer, today was a 14 strainer, 12, right? So it's going to paint a picture of how hard you went. And really for the tool to be effective, it's like, okay, the inputs are always the same.
Yeah.
It's always taken from the same place. And so that gives you a data set that does have value. Whereas if we start to get really into the weeds with like, oh, well, when you do 260 watts, you don't recover as well on Monday. That maybe is like an area where we don't have as much value to all of our members, and it's super hyper focused.
I have this vision for like a dystopian future for a Whoop, right? So you see these Tesla robots that they announced like a couple of months ago.
I know.
So I'm thinking, well, I'm going to get one of these Tesla robots. They're saying they're like going to be 50K around that coming in 2025, 2026. You get your Tesla robot, but he has access to my Whoop data. Okay. So now he starts going, hey, your recovery's not great. I think you need a massage, bro. And he gives you a massage. Or you didn't sleep last night. Let me figure out this sleep environment for you. So he's lighting some little candles, some soft lighting, a little bit of music. That's my dystopian vision for Whoop. You need to bring me into the game. I need to get into these meetings.
I don't want a robot. I just want a drone for when I forget stuff at my house and it just flies it to me. Do you know what I mean?
You don't want a robot gluing your tubulars. You need a robot gluing your tubulars.
Dude, I'm gonna curse again. My friggin' vacuum my like robotic vacuum can't even vacuum the house without like going down the stairs and stuff. And we're talking about robots doing our tubulars. Like, yes, okay, but I'm sorry. This is a bunch of bullshit. Like, I just don't see it.
Yeah, like,
I want to believe this. I want to drink this Kool-Aid, but
I feel like
I'm scratching my face a little bit here. Like
I trust them to clean my bike. I'm not sure if I trust them to take a couple of links out of the chain.
I think we want to believe that there's gonna be robots. I mean, I'd also love the Jetsons like pack on my back to shoot around. You know what I mean? Like, we don't need a chopper. We're just gonna get the jet packs. Like, all these things sound cool. I'm not sold yet. I want to be wrong.
Do you have a dystopian vision for where you'd like Whoop to go that's maybe more realistic than mine?
I think if you think about a product like ours and you think about what a decade looks like and how far it goes, I think the things that we're going to be able to track in taking health into your own hands, cycling is an inherently hard sport. Sport in general beats you down, whether you're a weekend warrior or you're not. For me, Whoop has given me, I just know that if I get 5 hours of sleep 3 days in a row, that I'm a mess. And I would constantly do that. Even when I was racing, I'd be like, oh, I can take that early flight and just get home because I'll be so much happier when I'm home and I'll be in my own little place. But if I know now, if I do that, it's bad for me and I don't perform well and I don't feel good. And it's taught me so much about myself. I think where Whoop's headed with regards to women's health, with regards to being able to track things with new technology that's so much more accurate. When you start to understand that you're basically wearing like a sleep lab, a health tracker, it's going to be able to tell you so much. I mean, we're already, when you get COVID, it already is like, hey, you're very likely have something going on. You should chill. You know what I mean? We're already doing that. Imagine that with so much more accuracy.
And I think if you plug AI into this, which is obviously you guys are, I haven't seen the roadmap, but obviously you guys are working on this. Everyone's working on it. But if we think about for us in cycling, and now I can give a year of Whoop data, any year of Training Peaks data to AI, be like, find me patterns. Right. It's like, oh, hey, every time you do a threshold session after 2 o'clock in the day, your sleep is compromised by 40%. It's like, whoa, that's a massive thing I never knew. Yeah. Now what happens if I do my threshold sessions earlier in the day? Whoa, your sleep isn't compromised. Like, you could start drawing conclusions that humans will never be able to figure out because the data crunching is just too complicated.
Well, we're already doing that. You can already go into Whoop Coach and ask it, what was my best month ever?
Oh, I didn't even know that.
And it will knock it out. You can ask it what have been my 3 hardest days that I've ever done. You can ask it like what are my best journal inputs that have given me the most success and best outcomes. You can start to crunch this data already. We're way ahead of the times with that type of number crunching. But yeah, to take double sets and things like this, that's going to be a whole nother unlock to be able to crunch numbers on that side and to be able to bring it down. These insights are things that some of the best coaches are already looking at.
Yeah, no, I've talked to some coaches off air who are already playing around with some of this stuff with Whoop and running against Training Peaks. Starts getting even more interesting the more data sets you layer into this. Like, talk to one coach who's already using the Whoop data with the Training Peaks data with continuous glucose monitor data to see what effect the fueling's having, to heart rate variability, to train. It's like, whoa, you can start drawing conclusions there.
Yeah. Pugacha was just on Peter Tia's podcast, and he was just saying, he's just using HRV, of course. I think there was for a while, people were like, oh, there's like data saying that it's, just snake oil and this, that. But it's like, no, but if you've used it, and if we know the teams and the athletes and how many people are using HRV to
HRV is a medical, like HRV wasn't designed by the sports industry.
Yeah, exactly.
Dr. Dan Plews is one of like the early pioneers in writing about HRV on the podcast. And he was giving me the background to it. Like, it's a legit medical like instruments they're using.
I know. I think that people that look at it and think that it doesn't have some like real quantifiable things that you can change or look at. I mean, this is, it's there, and I see it every day at my work. So I don't need to convince myself, and I don't really want to convince anyone else. You try it, you see if you like it. If it's for you, great. If it's not, then okay. It's one of those things that it's like I was saying earlier about the data set. You got to know how to look at the data in order to be able to make a generalization or to be able to make a change. And as soon as you understand the pattern, as soon as you understand the thing, it becomes a lot. I've seen so many riders in a negative and in a positive way change their environments and have their HRVs just go through the roof. Bad relationship, altitude, illness, come back. It's there. I mean, we work with so many athletes, and we were looking at so many data sets all the time with permission, of course. This thing is wild. Like a rider that gets COVID and then, doesn't do well, but then you just see them get back to their baseline to where they were. And then they start performing at that same level, and it's in there. You can literally see this. It's not like, oh man, we're thinking that this is true. This is what our hypothesis is. It's clear as day.
Yeah. And you could probably start running it against pro cycling stats. Like,
big time. 1,000% with my hand on my heart. Yes.
That's fast. How accurate is it? I always wondered this. It's really cool. That's bringing a new immersive elements to watching bike races. But how accurate is that Whoop data when it comes up on the screen it flashes up Van der Poel's heart rate power data? Because we're all I think any bike rider is a little skeptical of, power if anyone's used it. Yeah. It changes by the second.
Yeah, power is tough. It needs to be normalized for you to like get a sense of it. You know what I mean?
10-second power.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, we've done a lot with mountain bike with our Whoop. We call it Whoop Live, which is all of the data that's coming into the races, and that will continue to grow. We started out with just doing live heart rate off the riders, painting a picture of how hard they're going at a certain moment.
Cool idea.
Yeah, and then now we will do it with head to head. So it's Anthony and Jeremy head to head going all out up this climb, and then it's Anthony's at 190 and Jeremy's only at 170, and like let's see if there's an attack that's going to happen. This is the way that we want it. We want this to go. There is of course probably like a second delay from when it goes there and then it has to go up to the sky and come back down and go to your TV screen. It's really cool. we are going to a place with this where there's going to be so much more included. But today, already you can see your by a lot of your heart rate zones, your minimum and maximum heart rate. You can also do strain, so head-to-head strain, and there's more to come. So today you actually can paint a picture about what the riders are doing. And it's been a cool insight for the Mountain Bike World Cup. It's definitely
is there like a
future
bargaining that has to go on with the teams here? Because obviously if, Poggy's in a 2-up break with Van der Poel, Van der Poel doesn't want it broadcasted. He's at 198 heart rate when Poggy's at 140.
What's funny is that I've gotten to know Van der Poel a bit just because he is one of our athletes that's in, as one of the teams that we work with. And he's been on the product for a super long time wearing it, but long before we partnered. One of the things I don't think he cares about that.
No,
he's not the kind of guy he cares a lot. I would say, and I don't want to speak out of turn, but he is a guy that wears the product and believes in it fully and has for a long time. He has insane data sets. The team is super invested in it. They love all the data. All of the riders are wearing it from a performance standpoint. They want the data. That's not just true for Alpecin. There's many teams that are like this. The thing about those guys is that I don't think that they care so much. They're like he said to me, do whatever you want with the data.
You know what? You know how good he is. I was chatting to Fred. I can't remember if this is on air or off air. Fred won't want me saying. I was chatting to Fred Wright on the podcast.
He won't want me saying this. I'm going to say it anyway.
Yeah, whatever. Sorry, Fred. But Fred was telling me he was in the early move in Flanders, and then Poggy and Van der Poel came across, and everyone else from the early move got dropped apart from Fred. So it's Poggy, Van der Poel, right. Fred. And it was like my experience of being on the back of the break in Kermesse that we talked about at the start, but totally the opposite. He said they rated him so little, they didn't give him any shit. They never asked him to ride through. They never even acknowledged he was there.
I remember this.
He's like, it was such a head fuck. Because he's like, they think that little of me. They're not even abusing me or cajoling me or letting gaps go. They're just like doing their thing. And they won't even have to attack. They realize they're just going to ride away anyway. So why waste your breath? He's like, I felt this small.
It was a great race though.
They're superstars though. They're a difference. So I could see why Van der Poel doesn't mind if someone sees that he's at 150 heart rate. It's like, what are you going to do with that? He's going to launch it like 1900 watts up the next berg.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I think that the thing is that if you look back, these guys have had so much talent in one finger. This was the same. You've had riders over the course of, my career for sure, where they just have more talent in one finger. And even Sven Nys could kind of win at command. Like you thought you were going as hard as you could and you were at the absolute end. And then he went click, click, and you're gone and it's over. And this happened to me many times where you're in the break at the road race and someone has been tail gunning it or just sitting and they haven't been doing as much work or they're more efficient. They do better in the heat and they just have a whole nother set of gears. And that's bike racing.
Roadman, I know how serious you take your goal setting, whether they're fitness or life-related goals. If you're looking for a powerful ally to support you on this journey, look no further than Huel. Huel has become my secret weapon for when I don't have time to prepare a balanced meal. It ensures I get the nutrition I need without sacrificing time or taste. Plus, it stops me from reaching for that takeaway menu. I always throw a bottle into my backpack when I'm heading into the city to work, and it stops me eating junk convenience foods, snacking on croissants and bars of chocolate, because I know they don't support my training goals. It's a handy, nutritious meal on the go, and it's got over 22 grams of protein. Huel is perfect for athletes that don't have time to cook or prepare food before a training session. It's convenient, nutritious fuel at your fingertips, ensuring you hit your daily fueling needs for that session. Huel Ready to Drink has 26 essential vitamins and minerals in every single bottle. You're getting a whopping 175 health benefits. Plus, it's made from natural ingredients like tapioca, sunflower seed, coconut, and more. The best part, it's the flavors. There's 8 crazy, beautiful flavors. Iced coffee is what's in my backpack right at the moment. You can get Huel directly to your home. All you got to do is head on over to the Huel website, huel.com/roadman.
Yeah, I don't think people fully appreciate that if you haven't seen those different layers to the onion. If you've only got to race in Cat 1 or Cat 2, I remember racing, I'm going to say Tour of Beauce. And it was a really hard day. I remember being in the gutter, hard race, fun race, but hard race. I was like in the gutters, getting it hard on that Queen stage up to Mount Megantic.
Yes.
And Philip Daigen was riding for United Healthcare that year, but he'd come back. He won stage in the Vuelta, and he was riding down in Tier 2 then before he went back to Sky. And obviously, Irish connection, I know Philip. So we're single file, like there's like 150 guys in the gutter, single file, in a crosswind. And I just see Philip riding up the far side of the road with about 25 bottles in the back of his jersey. And he's going along like he's riding to the shop. And he's like, hey, I thought you want a ball? I was like, no, I'm good. I can't take my hands off the bars or I'm going to get dropped. And he's like, cool, catch you later. Rides up to the next guy. Want a bottle? I was like, there's layers to this game. I am way behind where he is.
I remember we're racing one of the big road races in the U.S. It must have been, must have been like Tour of Missouri or one of the UCI stage races. And I remember it was in the gutter and Taylor Phinney was right in front of me. And I made a very clear decision that I'm going to have to let this wheel go in front of me, and it's single file, it's head crosswind, it's bad. The team's got it fully in there, and this section goes for a couple miles. And so I'm not even going to try to blow myself to make this, because if the group that I'm with doesn't come back together, then I'm not going to make it. So I just pull the pin. Everyone's yelling, everybody's pissed, and I know because everyone's in the same position as me, and I'm the loose link. Like I'm the one that's going to make this group sever even further. 3 guys in front of me have already pulled the pin. I'm pulling the pin now, and this is like that group's gone. Taylor Phinney, I remember just legitimately just clicking down and riding across 30 seconds at that point, just block headwind. The group's going, and he just got there, and I remember like, what the fuck, man? Like this is, more talent in one finger. We had, some of us had little 4-bangers, the 4 little angry squirrels in the engine. Some of us had V6s. Some of us had a duked out V8, and then there were guys that just had the full blown like V12. It's just that's life. It's unfortunate, but it's true.
Poggy's on the new version of the V12 this year. Did you see we'll finish on this, the Worlds this year? I listened to the American who runs for DSM. Is it Vermeersch?
No. I know who you're saying. Sorry, go on.
I can't remember the American's name. Right? Anyway, the DSM rider, the American, his name slips me, but he was in the early break when Pogacar came across. Trapnik dropped back and he brought Pogacar across. Yes. Pogacar got to it, but I heard his post-race interview and he's like, I knew Poggy was going to go on the climb, so I got into wheel 2. And they're like, how'd you let him just ride away from wheel 1? He's like, I hit my all-time PB 2-minute power on his wheel going up. He had like 700 watts for 2 minutes or something. He's like, there was 4 minutes left on the climb and I just pulled the pin. Poggy was gone. I was like, how is this possible that one rider is just that much better than everyone else? But it's the layers to the onion.
Yeah. I mean, the physiology is there. I mean, every once in a while, you get a Mercs that's just their VO2 max and their blood work, and the whole thing is just they just get all the right components. I remember Danny Pate used to say to me, or had said to me at one time, do you remember Danny Pate?
I think he won the Ross, which is our National Tour of Ireland.
Dude, Danny was such a good rider. I got to know him when I was on Jelly Belly. He rode with us for a couple of years, but I always loved Pate. He was on Sky. He did a bunch of those years where he rode the front at the Tour and just could do 320 watts for 5 hours without really thinking a lot about it. He was really gifted like this. But he was always like, very few riders get the full package. Some riders, they don't have the head. Some riders don't have the blood work. Some riders don't respond to altitude camp. Some riders don't. Like, he just kind of went down this thing. It's like, it's just a handful of riders. And you could say this about some of the riders that we've talked about, like they didn't have the career they could because of one of those things, right? Yeah. They didn't have the head for it. They didn't have, they got sick too much, right? That's the blood work thing. So there's like all these different things, but every once in a blue moon, you get a Remco, you get a Pogacar that has the head for it, right? The fame's not all in his head. He doesn't, he can hold himself well. You get the blood work, you get the VO2 max, you get the genetic gift, right? Like Van der Poel, if you just go down through the lineage of his family, he's got on both sides. Phinney, same thing. Yeah. Huge family. These things they're not accidents. It's not surprising that they did well, but when you look at, Poulidor and you think about Van der Poel and you think about his father and his mom, all of these things start to paint a picture for dude, you were kind of born into an insane genetic profile.
And we're so blessed as cycling fans at the moment that we have like the 5 or 6 X-Men like Van der Poel,
Yeah.
Remco, Wout, MVP, Jonas.
And they all go back to being juniors and being insane. Even Sagan, like second at the cyclocross world championships when it was coming up, but totally off the map, kind of raw to it, didn't know. But these are the things where you start to look at it, and not all of the guys that become world champion or women that become world champion go on to have insane, accolades for the rest of their career. But there are a few that you're like, he's pretty good. He's pretty good. He was winning worlds when he was junior. I mean, Van der Poel also has won practically every cyclocross championship that he's entered.
Yeah, it's wild.
As a junior racing in Louisville, he wins. You know what I mean? This is like, these are, when we were racing, I remember we went to Coxside one year and Sven Nys won, I think. And we were looking at the lap times, and what come out was that Van der Poel did 2 laps faster than the pros in the junior race. He fucking smashed Sven Nys in his prime, and all of the other grown-ass men smashed him when he was like 17 years old. I mean, this is not a fluke. This isn't like, oh man, this is like this is some crazy thing. It's like, no, he just good. He was good technically. He was good with his engine. I mean, he just, like I said, more talent in one finger.
I think on that quite somber note, we'll leave it. Jeremy Powers, it's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Thanks everyone for listening.
If you enjoyed this conversation, please click up here. There's another video I know that you're absolutely going to love. And click over here and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of our amazing upcoming guests.